Microphone check, 1, 2, what is this? It's the 5'7" assassin in the podcast business. I am your host, Rohan Patra, the rap music plug at your service.
Here we are again at the end of a rainbow.
To me, one of the things that impresses me the most about music is its ability to make me care about life experiences, perspectives, and topics that I either don't know anything about or have no relation to my current day-to-day life. Today's guest, rapper-producer Pink Navel from Massachusetts, is a prime example of being so good at what they do that they make me care about something that, frankly, I could care less about these days. That thing being video games. Because on Pink Navel's latest album, How to Capture Playful, fully produced by Kenny Segal, the whimsical passion, the lyrical and musical brilliance all combine together to creating one of the strongest albums of 2023, which is centered around a core foundational subject of video games. So I'm very excited today to have Pink Navel on the show to dive into their expressive style of rap, the wonderful Ruby Yacht crew, and the makings of the terrific brand new album, How to Capture Playful. The Rap Music Plug podcast presented by QLC TV is the remedy to the I don't have anything good to listen to problem. Through in-depth artist interviews, album reviews, and general rap commentary on the best that the underground rap scene has to offer, this is your one-stop shop to knowing what to add to your queue, play next, or pop into your record player. Welcome to the show. Pink Navel, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you, dog?
I am doing all right. Yeah, they're doing pretty good.
Sweet. It's another beautiful day on the road for me. So just been different place every day. It's nice though.
You're in Bend, Oregon. Is that how you say it? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm currently sitting in a pizza shop in Bend, Oregon. Went to some thrift stores, the homies, and just kind of took a little side quest over here to chat with you. So yeah, just chilling.
I love it.
Hell yeah.
You got a pretty idiosyncratic style of rap. I think that's a good way of putting it. And you're very often referential to certain hobbies you have. Obviously, video games, that's like an obvious one with your new album. But
For sure.
These are things that, some of your listeners may even me included, to be honest, may not always be super familiar with. And I always wonder with artists such as yourself who kind of have that kind of style, like, does it concern you, or do you concern yourself at all with being accessible, quote unquote, to other people that maybe not are into the kind of niche things you're into? Or do you kind of like to appeal to what you love and let that attract who it attracts?
Well, to be honest, I kind of see it as the inverse, right? Where my freedom to be hyper niche about the things that I'm into makes me accessible to people who sort of feel as outsiders in this world of rap, like queer people, neurodivergent people. And when you kind of like take away that curtain and say, like, I kind of see you in a way that I think other people either aren't showing or don't see them, it makes your music accessible to people that aren't usually being rapped to or like sung to. And that's something that I really instill in my work, because that's what drew me to a lot of indie rap and nerdcore rap and art rap from the 2010s era. A lot of that same ethos of just like really being honest and genuine about the stuff that you're really into and rapping about it is what drew me to the genre in general. So I try to like keep that tradition going with my work for sure.
That's interesting. That's a really interesting way of putting it. I totally see what you mean now that you put it that way. Is being that kind of, I don't know, vessel or force for people that you're describing that don't always feel as, connected to the typical rap stuff? Like, is that something that really drives you, that really like inspires you to keep going and making music for them?
Yeah, absolutely. And just, in some way it is a bit self-serving just to be proud of this like weird thing that I do, and be unwavering in the weirdness. I really dig the privilege I have to do that, and I want to do it for as long as I can, for sure. I don't want to fold to the industry or the trends to you know do something that's more accessible, quote unquote, in the way that you're using the word.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
No, that's interesting. And
yeah.
you're speaking of like self-serving, like one thing that I take from your raps very clearly is that it just feels really raw, like a really raw expression. You're putting your entire soul in it, whether it be something, more, emotional, or something that you're just really happy or excited about or passionate about that really interests you. So like how does making rap music for you serve as a release, an emotional release or cathartic release, anything like that?
Well, yeah, I think it's like the classic story of just like a living artist. We all go through stuff. We all experience life and experience hardship and experience joy, and it can be very cathartic to commiserate or celebrate those parts of your life. And I think making music, if that's something that you're interested in and passionate about, can be a great way to do it. So it's very just ingrained in my everyday life to sing about the things that are going on for me. And I've been doing it for so long, it just really feels like, it sounds kind of cliche, but it feels like second nature to
Mm.
do these things and to like continue this practice. And so that's always been part of the approach, for sure.
I mean, you mentioned the life of an artist here, and just in the kind of response you gave, it's reminding me a lot of Ruby Yacht in general, and particularly the conversation I had with Rap Ferreira, because I think there was a particular moment where I asked him about like if he, I'm trying to think exactly how I put it, but I think it was like if he prides himself on being unique or different, like how much does he try to do that? And he kind of said a very similar thing in just different words that you just said, where it's like it's second nature to him. it's
Mm.
it's not really a thing that it's conscious decisions to stand out and try to
Yeah.
make music that is different. It's just who you are, and that reverence I feel and that pride that I can hear in your voice in terms of how you talk about the life of an artist is very interesting, because again it reminds me of a lot of the artists I hear from the Ruby Yacht, and about like how they take the pride and the importance they feel, I think, as a poet or as a artist. And so like what about that Ruby Yacht ethos has resonated with you and how you like to create art in your career?
Yeah, I think you're totally on the money. I think everybody in the crew, we make very different stuff. We come from very different backgrounds, but what unifies us is this similar thinking and this ethos of just like complete freedom in our artistry. And I've been, I've learned everything I know from being in Rubiat and from experiencing and touring and creating with this group, that I really instill that. And I definitely pride myself in honoring what we represent as a crew. And what drew me to them initially, I I've known Roy for 10 years now, which is a long time, but just upon meeting them and on the road, just this like degree of freedom and fun that I was not exposed to at the time. Like
Mm.
true, just like true freedom and fun, and doing something so unique but so comfortable in doing it, not feeling out of place, coming with this perspective of like, we're about to do something so incredible and so unique that you're the one missing out if you're not listening, versus like uh, versus no one's listening to us because we're X, Y, or Z,
Mm-hmm.
type of rap. And I always just really admired that. To this day, I still do, but now it's more like I, continue that and honor it in a through my practice, for sure.
Yeah, there's definitely a conviction and a confidence to what Ruby Yacht, your crew really represents to me.
Yeah.
Just being so unabashedly yourself. I think
Hmm.
that's a way to put it. And I think it's what's interesting about Ruby Yacht too is like I would not be able to compare you to any artist out there. But that being said, you feel so at home within Ruby Yacht. Like that makes
Mm.
sense. Like, and that's weird to say because of what I just said. Like you seem very one of one, but yet I'm like, oh no, these are your peoples. Like that just makes sense, and it's odd that I can say that so
For
confidently.
sure, for sure. There's definitely like a Ruby Yacht sound, but I think over the years it's gotten more and more broad, and it's really more of a spirit, that you can hear in the music because, you know, Ray raps a lot different than I rap, but I think when you hear the two styles, there's this like encompassing spirit is I think the perfect word that like draws back to the crew for sure.
And as the distinguished leader and founder of Ruby Rap Ferreira, I know he's someone you just mentioned you've known for a decade, which is interesting. I
Mm.
know you respect and really have a lot of love for this guy. So, what aspects of his artistry or his approach to his craft really you find particularly special or inspiring?
Yeah, I don't know. I love Ro. He really does it like no other person, And I think a lot of artists have great talent, but feel this pressure to play the game a little bit, and it takes them very far. But I think Ro has gotten just as far, if not farther, by being, you know, by stepping outside of that and really paving a new path that a lot of people follow, you know, and that can't go unrecognized. The groundwork that not not only Rubiot, but just like his own approach to making and um, putting out music into the world, how it's affected indie rap today is just undeniable. You know,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
so I think it's very significant and special for sure.
Yeah, I think for sure, like I know so many people, myself included, that have been that owe a lot to our kind of current tastes and current music interest for to Rap Ferreira and what he did,
Yeah,
because I know things that happened day and night was a pretty groundbreaking listen for me to just introduce
absolutely.
me to a whole new world that I didn't know existed. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's I think again it's that idea of being so, especially when it comes to not only the music you make, but the road you choose to travel. That's something that's like, I think maybe now it feels a little more due to people like Rat Ferreira and others too that have paved a certain way. It now feels a little more clear on like, oh, you can actually get you can make some moves here. You can make some things happen in this space. But 12 years ago, 13 years ago, there wasn't really this established, like, I feel like as lively of a scene right now that we're getting. I feel like there's just so much good music right now. It's insane.
Exactly, and even down to the model, the just the return of cassette tapes in indie rap, I think, in part can be attributed to the Rubiot approach, the style and the rollout strategy, if you will. Everything. It all can be charted back to like you know early indie rap. Mike Eagle too, and like the Hellfire Club stuff, and
100%.
you know, it's all sort of like the groundwork that I think a lot of what we do in the scene now kind of builds off of.
Yeah. And part of that kind of approach is the way I think of how you engage with your fans. Because I think
Mm.
unlike almost any artist out there, you have a really deep and organic kind of relationship with your fans that I find is so fascinating. Like I know you did these Twitch streams where you make
Yeah.
beats and you invite fans even to like call in and talk
Mhm.
to you. Like that's very, very unique, very, very special, I feel, to
Yeah.
your fans. Why have you put such an emphasis on connecting with your fans in such a way? Why is that important to you?
it it comes from a different part of my influence that's like totally outside of rap. But I know I rap a lot about this guy Zay Frank on my last record, Epic. And Zay Frank is this very early YouTuber who I study a lot in his philosophy around social media and connectivity online. And when I started the Epic Club, it really was a modeled directly off how he used to interact with his fans, sort of back in the day, early 2000s on YouTube. And I was very much involved in this as a fan of his. And he would do these crazy collaborative projects and really like connect with like if you wrote a comment on his video, he might make a full video about what your suggestion was. Like he was very much truly listening, and he would do these TED talks about how the internet can be a tool to like tighten the bonds in real life as opposed to it being perceived as another world outside of real life.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started streaming, during the pandemic, I think a lot of people tried this. I, what I what I wanted for me to make my sort of approach to that unique was this idea that you could just call me and like say what's up. And I've made like really amazing friends through this. Like, so we just put out Epic, or sorry, we just put out How to Capture Playful, and the cassette tapes were designed by my friend Jan, Hello Ten Bear, and Jan I met because they were just always on my streams and would
Mm.
send me gifts to put on the layout, and was really just helpful for no reason because they just digged the vibe that was happening. And so they've been instrumental in helping me out with all these different visual projects because they're so talented on Photoshop and those types of programs. And it all stems from that. And I also have to shout out Slurpee, who was another person who I met through the streams who would just call in all the time. And I just loved their gumption. This like kid who's just so creative. I guarantee you, in a couple of years, you're going to have Slurpee on this podcast
Mm-hmm.
under the similar vibe. Like they are definitely the next generation. So it was cool to connect in that way. I haven't been doing it as much. I think I've kind of stepped away, but I'll always love what I was able to build there. And I think the Epic Club and its own ethos of just like truly, open-minded acceptance to anyone who's interested in trying this weird thing called art, will always be really special.
Yeah, I really like that there were some really influential and important like early YouTubers. Some of those people really still hold a special place in my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, the that thought that Zay Frank that you said they had about the internet and social media and all that, about like a tool to tighten bonds versus kind of being this othering thing that I feel like a lot of people treat the internet these days, which is just like
Mm,
a way to as a tool for us to like kind of become further and further apart actually.
yeah.
um i'm I'm thinking of your not this past record but your last one, Epic, because it had a very heavy incorporation of like internet culture, like TikToks, memes. Like it was a big part of like the album's fabric. And I
Yeah.
found it incredibly fascinating. Not one just because of like the fact that you pulled it off in a way that was like really cool and like musically engaging,
Mm,
but just the more overarching ideas of this kind of new age culture that's being developed by the internet, which I just find is like so endlessly intriguing, fascinating, scary at times. It's like all of
mm.
it in one. And like kind of diving into that a bit more, like what do you find like fascinating in a positive way about the internet and the culture that it brings?
I think really this collaborative transformation of media and how fast it moves, you know, in terms of creating memes or creating content online that's informed by previous content and this deep lore of sort of just like internet ephemera that exists
Mm-hmm.
is really fascinating to me. And how how TikTok has added to that is so wild where you can divorce a video's audio from its visual,
Yeah.
and sometimes the audio of a video is really what takes off versus the, the video itself, and you'll see people remix and redo and just like mess with that part in a way that just first of all, it's so much like rap and
That's what I'm thinking.
sampling.
As soon as you're saying this, it's like the repurposing
Right,
idea. Yeah, it's like recontextualizing.
right.
That's like so much about what hip hop
Yeah, and I
does.
mean, this is a thing that I thought about for a long time. I did this record called Andre's Gift and Omer Tower, and a lot of that record is about this philosophy that like memes are art in its rawest form. It's like collaborative, community driven artwork that is totally open source, and um, I think TikTok is a huge example of that. Meme generators are a huge example of that, and then like how we continue and honor this like continuity, you know,
Hmm.
like the success baby, and how like now the success baby is like an adult and you can see what he looks like when he's grown up now. Like that's crazy. You know what I mean? Or like just stuff like that. Like that is really, really fascinating. The other thing I want to mention is, in the 90s, early 2000s, Doom, Madlib, Dilla, they were all sampling, cartoons and TV and movies. Wu Tang Clan was sampling, like the samurai flicks and like the martial
Hmm.
arts flicks. And I think that's obviously because that's what they were watching and that's what they were interested in. But I think in the now, a lot of folks will sample that stuff and like flip it, and it can sound it will it can it's not always this way, but it can sound kind of hammy
Hmm.
because it's just an emulation of the past. Where I think what they were getting at was they're pulling from everywhere into into rap and like into hip hop. Like everything they do is informing how they approach hip hop. So I think my sampling TikToks and viral videos is the exact same thing for the modern era. And obviously, I'm not like the first person to ever do this. I mean, look at Ultralight Beam by Kanye West. Like
All
that
right.
song has that sample of that girl in
Yeah,
the
it's
car, and
it's it's now it's like cemented in history.
it's like, yeah, exactly. So it's not like I'm the first person to do this, but I think it's like an obvious continuation of that practice.
That's really fascinating.
Mm.
Uh, I'm like, yeah, I'm thinking of that's just that idea of it being so like art in its purest form. That's interesting because I literally just shared earlier today on Twitter something that oh you actually you just spoke with them Cinema Sci, Real Notes.
Yeah,
Um they shared this like Ninja Turtles, like it's this iced out Ninja Turtles meme. I don't even know if you call this a meme, but there's no text. But yeah, it's a meme where it's like they're all like iced out in like chains and like rollies and fucking who's purple one? Is it Donatello?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, Donatello has like lean in his cup. It's truly like the most funniest like heartwarming image I've ever fucking seen. And it's madness. Like who's doing this? Like who is doing this? Like that's what I
it's
get.
cool.
The internet at its best is where I just tell myself like who the fuck did this? And it's again not like dissimilar to some of the reactions I have to some of my favorite music in hip hop, which is like
Mm.
who is thinking that this was a good idea, but it works so well. Like, you know,
That's so real.
like
That's so
I think
real.
of your fucking song on this latest album, Character Select. I just
Mm.
the whole thing, I'm like, why is this going so hard? I'm so fucking confused.
Yeah, dog, just the list. It's and that's inspired by a few different things, but something I didn't even think of, and then somebody mentioned it to me, but it's totally maybe a subliminal inspiration, was that old video, the Ultimate Showdown of Ultimate Destiny. Where do you know this video? And it's
Not
like
but not right
Terminator,
now, no.
Darth Vader. Da, da, da. It's like this like song about how all these fictional characters were all fighting, and then like
Oh, I think I've seen that, like really
Mr.
old, yeah.
Rogers is like the guy that wins at the end or whatever.
Yeah, like,
It's so inspired by that. I didn't even realize it, and I was like, oh my god, it totally is, you know. But yeah,
and what are some ways that you feel like the internet culture and all of that is like negative, and like do you feel that's going to continue getting worse, or do you see any
you know,
hope?
I don't know. I find myself. I mean, so I'm 27 now, and just like this past like 6 or 7 months, I'm seeing myself kind of like drift out of like the now in terms of internet culture, not knowing about. I'm just so used to like being on top of like all of the memes and all of the
Hmm.
stuff going on, but I've something came around and I just didn't know what it was, and then I was like, damn, I guess it's my time to be like the out of touch. And I think that can feel kind of like deflating. There's obviously a lot of hate on the internet and really evil stuff on there. I mean, there's plenty and plenty and plenty of negative sort of like energy and like activity happening online. But I don't know exactly. I think it's like it's like any tool that can be, you know, used used for good or bad.
Yeah.
It's going to be used for both, you know, which is very unfortunate, but it's just the way it is, you know.
Yeah, I tend to feel pretty similar. I think it's kind of similar thoughts to like I have with AI in some ways. Not the exact same, but it's just lots of great stuff can be done, but a lot of negative. It's all just about, who what the powerful want to do with it, and what the
Yeah,
money's behind, and what
for
certain
sure.
regulations allow or don't allow. That's kind of how I see it. I want to get into this new album though, How to Capture Playful.
Let's go.
I so I clearly from this album you are passionate about gaming, but I understand Kenny is as well. And
Yeah.
I guess just start with this, like, could you illustrate like how you aim to like showcase your love for gaming in this album, and like why you felt so inspired to center the album around this topic?
Well, when I met Kenny and we toured together, what we really bonded on was playing games in the van, and we were playing the same game at the time, so it was just fun to like talk about it, and we are like exploring the world together in some ways. And in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, well, if I ever get to do a record with Kenny, I want it to be about video games in some way. And flash forward 3 years, and we're like talking about doing it for real. And I think I've always been really passionate and interested in nerdcore rap, but at the same time, I wanted to like push forward the like push the envelope on what is considered nerdcore. Where whereas I wanted this record to be about video games, but not sound like 8-bit, or
Mm-hmm.
not be too on the nose. I think video games as a culture and how we play is an interesting idea to be explored. And so at first, I wanted this record to be about the push and pull of work and play, because I'm someone who obviously has been rapping about pop culture and video games my like whole career. But what I wanted to try and do was, or I think what I found myself doing was I play games and think, okay, well, I'm gonna play this game and then I'm gonna have more material to rap about. And that in that way it makes it like my job to know. And the
Mm.
same with memes. It's like my job to know all of the internet culture and what's going on, because that's what I rap about. And uh, just that like philosophical question of like, is it even what I want to do then if I'm just doing it, for my rap? And so this like balance and dichotomy of work and play, and that was really like what I was trying to explore in the record. And then when we made it, we're getting a lot of feedback from the homies, and I think another dimension that was yet to be explored is like video games as escapism, and like what are we escaping when we play a game. And I think songs like Cracked and like Maps and Navigation kind of like touch on that, and even
Yeah.
Synergy as well. That's sort of where it comes from, where it's like about video games, the media, but it's also about video games like the practice and the hobby. And I think that was an interesting enough sort of like thing to get really deep on, and that's why the record ended up being so long. But yeah, and obviously it was something that Kenny was down to like explore too. He was super interested in that topic, and he even made a game to go with it, which is beautiful, and that'll be out soon. But
That's
yeah, I
rad.
don't know. I think it was cool because we're both into a lot of similar stuff in terms of gaming, but also a lot of different stuff. So there's a lot of different, worlds and filling the gaps on like video game history and culture from like both of our ends. So it's just cool.
Yeah, you mentioned escapism and like that idea of video games as a practice, because that's kind of I'm not like a like I'm like the most the most fraudulent gamer ever probably. Even that one I literally don't own a console right now. And the only games I really have like loved in my life are all the fucking sports games like Madden or Midnight Club, like the racing game. The one
Oh,
where
cool.
it's like the one where they had the most elaborate customizations. You could get like all the nice rims and graffiti and like decals. Anyways, I love that game and I was
That's
so
awesome.
elite at that game. But I'm not a gamer. I've never been a gamer.
For
But
sure.
I do respect it. And for me though, when I was really young, when I did like when I still lived with my parents and I did game a lot back then, I definitely used that as an escape, particularly from some family troubles and just like I
Yeah,
feel like a definite latent depression and anxiety that I just didn't couldn't recognize as
absolutely.
a kid. And I find that really fascinating, and I definitely felt that in moments on this record. So I'm really glad that you took it that way. And I'm thinking of a review actually that was done for this record on in Pitchfork by Dash Gardner, friend of the show, patron of the show, and
Oh yeah.
he mentioned that something that I wasn't aware of because again I'm not really a gamer like that, but on the track Present Vendor, it's about this merchant character in Zelda, right? And
Yeah, Beetle.
like the way you kind of rap about him is about like kind of making him seem like this kind of hero of sorts, and like it kind of
Mm,
makes a connection between the game and like just a more general real life person, if you will. And
mm,
I think it made me like realize like damn, video games just like books and shows, which I think are more commonly used in rap and music, so much
mm.
symbolism, like so much kind of like
Yeah, I mean,
draws
their
and
text, a video game is a text to be analyzed just like any film or movie is. There's representation, there's metaphor, there's narrative in just the mechanics of the game versus the story, even too. I mean, and that stuff can be really fun to explore. I mean, Beetle is this character that just walks the world with a huge, heavy backpack, and all he is there to do is to sell you stuff to succeed. That's all, that's his whole purpose. And when I was writing that song, I'm thinking, when you get to that final boss and you're like loaded up with all the right gear and all the right stuff, it's like, who do you have to thank for preparing you for this, world saving battle, you know, than the guy that, isn't getting much credit, but is a foundation. And I think that's a really great analogy for community and support
mm-hmm.
system, and just like acknowledging the people in your life that like are down to hold you up despite anything. Uh, and that's kind of like, you know, the the point of that song, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm imagining throughout this record, like you tried to make those kinds of connections or analogies to in other
Yeah,
instances in other ways.
absolutely. Like Boss Life is about Bowser, and it's a song from the perspective of Bowser, um, where he's like sort of like lamenting and how he never gets to like win because he's like destined to always lose.
Mm-hmm.
And that song's a bit more like comedic. It's not like very like introspective,
Yeah,
or,
yeah.
but I think it's still an interesting thing to explore. Where like, he's this guy that like just based on the game that he's from, like he will never win. And exploring this idea that like he also knows that, you know, like even though he tries, he knows that he's destined to always lose to Mario. Or, you know, what's another example? Reset, the first song, is about roguelike games where when you die, you reset everything, but you keep the knowledge of that realm. So now you know more about the game. So
Right.
the progression in the game is not in the system, it's in the player.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the idea of taking that into like the rap game and being like, every time I play a show, it's like a big reset, but I've played a show before, so I know what to do here. Or it also kind of touches on reincarnation and just like your whole life. Like it will be a bummer when I finally have to reset. Like, but yeah, there's all kinds of like analogs you can draw to like video games and life in that way. And all the songs kind of have a little bit of that.
Yeah, and I love that. And I just feel like overall you definitely like embodied the title, I'd say, because there's just a very
Yeah.
obvious brightness and joy, kind of wholesome vibe to just get swept up in when you're
Yeah.
playing this thing, and it does capture that playfulness, and
Mm.
I think it's just really fascinating because again, I'm not necessarily like the target audience from the standpoint of being a huge gamer, but I felt myself hella interested. So
Yeah.
yeah, and I think that's
Absolutely.
worth something. Yeah, and
Mm.
outside of the topic of like gaming directly, what were some other kind of topics or ideas that you were hoping to explore with this album?
Some other stuff like I think a lot of my work, like an overarching theme, is like nostalgia and childhood wonder, and I think that still comes up in this record too. Even though since Epic, I think I've matured a bit in terms of like what I'm rapping about in my style, but I think there's still that like youth aspect to my work, inner child healing kind of like stuff, and I think a lot of people who are really into games can relate to that. I speak for myself, and I think many people that I love that like it's diving into these worlds and like allowing yourself to really enjoy it is a way to sort of like heal that inner child that never got to do that, and never had the privilege to really know about Zelda or really like know about these things when they were younger. So I think that's a big part of it too.
And the production on this record, damn, very
Kenny
very impressive by the wonderful Kenny Segal, as
E
expected.
Crush.
Yeah, it's so vibrant. It's also I do find it interesting because it's very different from the sets of beats he created for Woods on Maps just like a few months
Well,
ago,
yeah,
right?
man.
Like it's
Kenny is a
incredible.
real amazing and talented and thoughtful producer. He's never going to make the same record twice, and he knows how I rap versus how Woods raps, or Rory, or Hemlock, or anybody, And he's really able to tap into that style and know what is appropriate, but still inject his DNA. Where it's like the beats are so different, but you know it's Kenny.
You know it's
I
Kenny.
think
Yeah.
that's really his talent, and the sessions were amazing, and it was so much fun to like work with somebody and have some directive. I'm so used to doing it all by myself, so it was cool to have that like extra brain and like bounce back and forth and sort of like explore in that way. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and so like obviously you've been a producer throughout your career. Like how much of the record the sound wise was that you kind of injecting your ideas, giving it to Kenny, and then Kenny working with it versus kind of Kenny taking the lead and you just like let him do his thing.
Well, it was a lot of like we did some demos on beats that he had already had, and we were exploring different like directions. And then once we made Reset and New Tech, it was like, all right, now we kind of have like a compass to sort of like direct the rest of the record. So then he began to like make stuff with me in mind that go in that direction. So that's where you get like just some of the other stuff in the record. But definitely sonically, he had the lead, but what I was writing and how I was rapping informed the sonic. It was very much like in sort of like echo loop, like an infinity loop of
Mm-hmm.
one thing influencing another and then back and forth. So to me, I found that really organic, and it was such a gift to have it happen so naturally. You know, it didn't feel
Yeah.
forced at all. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I just love the sound on this record because it is very has a huge variety. It definitely feels cohesive,
Mm.
but it has a huge variety. And you mentioned the tracks like Maps and Navigation. I think really the last couple tracks end the album not on a somber note, but on like a heavier note. And then you
Mm.
also still have like some more zany, more like upbeat and colorful sounds earlier in the record, but they all flow super nicely. Like it's a very
Absolutely.
like a particular needle you guys threaded, I think
Yeah,
pretty well.
I think so too. I think so too. I love how the record ends too. I love this sort of like introspective note that it kind of ends on, but it comes from the valley of that peak of like songs like Poet Gang Playing Cards and Boss Life and Present Vendor and the more kind of hype ones. But yeah, I think tonally it's diverse tonally as much as it is sonically, which is sort of a big achievement I think for us too. Is to have this huge wingspan of tone, which is dope.
Yeah, and I was listening to Epic recently, this week, and I was reminded of the fact that yeah, Kenny definitely gave you a sound that again wasn't like what you rapped on before, but it was in your wheelhouse. It made sense with
Yeah,
what you've done in the past. Uh,
absolutely.
given because like it's not like the way that you produce is incredibly night and day different in terms of this like the vibe tonally, I guess you could say. There's a
Yeah,
glitchiness, there's
absolutely.
certain drums that feel like they make sense, and I just think I was really
Mhm.
impressed with how he tailored the sound to you.
Me too. I think he absolutely crushed it. And like Epic is such a sonically focused record. I think all the beats kind of in that same space that I think
Yeah,
it's cool to follow that up with a record that's so, you know, all over the place, but
yeah,
in a good way.
in a
Yeah.
good way, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and I feel like this is the best rapping of your career, for sure, in my opinion. And you
Thank
have
you.
such a particular diverse set of flows on this record in particular. That's really
Mm.
cool. And I wonder, like, the fact that you did take a back seat on the production side, how did that allow you to maybe kind of like focus on your raps or like hone in on that part of your game a
Yeah.
bit more?
Well, yeah, that's exactly it. It just like gives you the space to just go in. And, you know, I told this story on Real Notes as well, but I spent my last $700 to fly out to LA for a week to make the bulk of this record. And it was like the only time that really it worked for both of us to do it. And I had like no money. And I was like, okay, I really have to bring it and make this count because this is kind of it, you know? Literally, we'd make two, sometimes three songs a day. We were like, from like zero to nothing, from like zero to 100, like full completion songs. So it was crazy. And I just felt this healthy and, you know, exciting pressure and challenge to like really make sure that I was bringing it. And I didn't do much writing before. I just would sit there and write there. But it was just, you know, you struck lightning and I really like was honed in and I felt, you know, excited about it to do it. So, I mean, like, for example, I wrote Present Vendor just like on the spot, like that day, you know? So just stuff like that. And same with like Hours Played, I just wrote right there. It's cool. But yeah, yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. I mean, I'm always fascinated by how people respond to that kind of pressure because that could have gone a different way. That could have got you in your
Absolutely.
head and just felt like, oh, this got to be good, and you're just
Yeah.
and it flops and it doesn't feel natural.
Yeah. But I knew that it couldn't go that way. I was like, I cannot let this go wrong.
Hmm.
So yeah, I didn't.
No, you did not. I love the record, and I felt
Thank you.
that energy. It didn't feel like a desperate energy like maybe it could have been, but it instead just felt like a just a very lively, vibrant feeling.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that comes across
Absolutely.
for sure.
Hell yeah.
Okay, so before we wrap this up, like what are some, maybe upcoming new music in the future or just like merch tour stuff that you want to call out?
Yeah. Well, as of right now, the vinyl and the cassette tapes are still available on Kenny's Bandcamp, which is kennysegal.bandcamp.com. And I have some shows coming up on November 11th and 12th. I'll be in Boston and New York with Fielded and Kayana, and that's going to be a lot of fun. And then in December, I'm opening for Open Mike Eagle on his tour. We're going to Texas. We're going to New Orleans. We're going
Oh
down
yeah, you're gonna be on that.
down
That's
the
gonna be awesome.
coast. So yeah, also so I'll be there with Mike too, and that's a big deal. I'm very excited about that. And so come catch some of those shows and say what's up. I'll have t-shirts and stuff, so definitely do that.
It's awesome. And I imagine you don't have any details on any upcoming new music late. You're just kind of focusing on this one still.
No, focusing on this one. I mean, I've been working on the next record kind of on and off since we kind of wrapped on this, but it's not,
Mhm.
that one's, yeah, like semi self-produced, like a more kind of just like Pink Navel affair, but that won't be for a while. So don't
Yeah.
even,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's all good.
Cool.
There's a lot to chew on still with this one. Thanks again for coming on. This is really, really
Thanks so much
appreciate
for
you
having
having
me, and
on.
thanks for working with me on the time and everything. And yeah, it's cool to do a podcast from a pizza restaurant.
Yeah, I hope you ate already before I wasn't keeping you
I
waiting.
did. Don't worry, I did. I
Okay,
did.
good, good, good. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you're super unique. Really love your spirit and what you bring to the game, and just keep
Oh,
doing
thank
it.
you
Just
so
keep doing you,
much.
man.
So much love to you, dog, and thanks for what you do for the scene too on the show. And yeah,
Thanks, man. Thanks.
hell
Appreciate
yeah,
that. Take care.
for sure. Peace.
Peace. So there we have it, another episode of the Rap Music Plug podcast presented by QLC TV. I hope this episode gave you some new perspectives and insights into what the greatest art form known to man in hip-hop music has to offer. If you want to support the show in the most meaningful way possible, it would be my absolute honor to have you as a patron in the new Rap Music Plug podcast Patreon. Through this Patreon, you will be getting exclusive content such as bonus episodes, exclusive album recommendations, exclusive playlists, early access to episodes, and more. And above all, though, you will be able to support the show directly in a way that will not only justify the crazy amount of time I spend on this show already, but allow me to cover some of the expenses related to supporting all of these great artists that we cover on the show through the website, and will allow us to sustain and build on this amazing growth that the RMPP has experienced recently. So if you have any questions about any of the Patreon stuff, or just want to keep tabs on the show, interact with me on rap music and all the great stuff that we can talk about, follow me on Twitter and Instagram at rapmusicplugpod, or shoot me an email at qlctv.podcast@gmail.com. You can also rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and subscribe on YouTube and Spotify as well. But that's enough self-promotion for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Peace.